today's podcast topic, is technology making us smarter or lazier? This is a question that, well, it feels more relevant basically every single day, doesn't it?
It really does. We're just swimming in technology, aren't we?
Completely. I mean, your smartphone is probably in your hand or pocket right now. AI seems to be predicting what we want to search for almost before we think it.
And getting information. It's instant, like turning on a tap.
Exactly. And that brings us to this really fundamental question about our own minds, our own thinking.
Yeah, is all this connectivity, this, limitless access to everything, is it actually making our brains sharper?
Is it genuinely boosting our ability to think deeply, to learn effectively, maybe even to be more creative?
Or is there a flip side? Could it be sort of subtly lulling us into a kind of mental comfort zone?
Making us intellectually complacent, less willing to do the heavy lifting mentally.
That's the core of the debate, I think.
It's a really profound puzzle, and the implications are just massive. It affects, well, everything, how we learn.
Whether that's academic stuff or, trying to get your head around English grammar.
Right. And how we work, how we interact, how we just connect with people in this digital world we're all living in.
Absolutely. So our goal today in this deep dive is to really take the ideas and arguments that have come up in research and discussion and just unpack this really complex relationship. It's definitely not straightforward.
We want to explore those compelling arguments about how technology might be pushing us forward towards more knowledge, more capability.
But also, and this is crucial, look honestly at the ways it could potentially be holding us back, how it might hinder that deep focused thinking, or maybe even make us less good at solving problems independently.
Okay, so let's start on the positive foot. The case for technology as a real catalyst for intellectual growth. One of the most striking points is just the sheer access to knowledge it gives us.
That's undeniable, isn't it? The digital age has, well, it's fundamentally changed the game. It's basically torn down old barriers.
Like geography or cost. Things that used to limit who could learn what.
Exactly. And now, vast, almost unimaginable amounts of information and educational resources are available to, well, billions of people. It's a democratization of knowledge on a scale we've never seen before in human history.
It really is like the biggest library imaginable, but it fits in your pocket and you can access it from anywhere. You see examples like those massive open online courses, MOOCs.
Oh, yeah. Platforms like Coursera, EDX, Khan Academy, even university-specific platforms. These aren't just little extras. They offer full-blown courses.
Sometimes with lectures straight from professors at, top universities around the globe.
And the sheer variety is mind-boggling. You can dive into super complex science like quantum mechanics if you really want to.
Or explore really nuanced humanities topics like post-colonial literature or, deep philosophical debates.
Stuff that maybe just 20 or 30 years ago was pretty much locked away in university libraries, accessible only to a few.
And if your goal is specifically mastering English, especially at a higher level, this is just incredible.
Oh, absolutely. A goldmine. You get access to authentic, challenging materials.
Things like full university lectures, published research papers, articles from places like The Economist or the New York Review of Books, podcasts on really specialized subjects.
Consuming that kind of material, it exposes you directly to sophisticated vocabulary, complex sentence structures, different ways of arguing and explaining things, the kind of language you need for academic or professional success.
It's English as it's actually used by experts in their fields. You just can't beat that for learning.
And then there's the power of search engines. Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, whatever you use.
Instant gratification for curiosity, right?
Pretty much. If you hit a tricky grammar point while reading, or you encounter some complex idea you don't quite get, bam, you can look it up immediately.
And within seconds, you've got access to maybe scholarly articles, expert blog posts, discussion forums where people are hashing it out.
It creates this amazing feedback loop. You have a question, you seek the answer, you find it, maybe that sparks another question.
It really encourages that self-directed learning approach. You become the driver of your own learning journey, following your interests.
Think about researching a complex topic, say, the ethics of gene editing. A quick search brings up maybe a scientific paper full of data alongside an opinion piece from a newspaper and perhaps a blog post from an ethicist.
And comparing those sources isn't just about gathering facts. It's practice and critical evaluation, isn't it?
Totally. You're forced to look at the different styles, think about who wrote it, what their potential angle might be.
Is this based on evidence, or is it more of an emotional appeal? What's the difference between, say, a peer-reviewed study and an editorial?
And honing those analytical skills is vital, not just for understanding the world, but for communicating effectively yourself, like building a strong evidence-based argument in an essay or presentation.
Okay, but there's a catch, right? The material definitely highlights a pretty major downside to all this easy access.
Ah, yes. The elephant in the digital room. Misinformation.
It's everywhere. Because the barriers to publishing are so low now, basically anyone can put anything online.
Which makes digital literacy absolutely essential. It's not just a nice-to-have skill anymore. It's fundamental.
It's not enough just to find information. You absolutely have to be able to figure out if it's trustworthy. Can you actually believe what you're reading or watching?
And that means developing some specific techniques, like really looking into the author. Who are they? Do they have expertise in this area?
Or checking the claims. Does this data match up with what other reliable sources are saying? Or does it seem way off?
And being aware of potential bias. Is the author or the website trying to push a particular agenda? Are they funded by someone with a vested interest?
These critical evaluation skills are not just about being a smart consumer of information either. They make you a better producer too.
Definitely. If you're writing something yourself, say for work or study, you need to use credible sources and be able to justify why they're credible. It adds weight to your own arguments.
There's an example about academic writing. Say you're exploring the impact of social media. You find a shocking statistic on some random blog.
And a different, maybe more nuanced statistic in a published research study. Evaluating those requires careful language.
Right. You might say something like, while some online sources claim X, peer-reviewed research suggests Y based on a larger sample size. That kind of phrasing shows critical engagement.
And it sharpens both your thinking and your ability to communicate precisely and persuasively.
The material also includes some case studies, like one about someone using an online platform, maybe Coursera, to study academic writing itself.
These platforms often provide a very structured learning path. You get video lectures, readings, quizzes.
And importantly, assignments that require you to actually produce written work, essays, reports, summaries.
This structure immerses you in the specific way people talk and write in that field, the vocabulary, the sentence patterns, the way arguments are built.
And doing the assignments forces you to practice using that specific kind of language. Plus, many platforms have discussion forums.
Right, where you interact with other learners, ask questions, debate ideas. That's practice in, more spontaneous communication, applying what you're learning.
So the technology enables it, but the real learning comes from that active engagement, grappling with material, writing, discussing. It boosts both your knowledge and your language skills, assuming you actually dive in.
Okay, so moving beyond just access, let's talk about how technology can provide tools that seem designed to, boost our cognitive processes directly, augmenting our thinking.
Like giving our brains a bit of a superpower.
Yeah.
Or at least a very efficient assistant.
Something like that. Examples include those productivity apps, Notion, Evernote, Trello, Asana.
There are loads.
Powerful organizers, basically.
Yeah, they help you wrangle huge amounts of information. You can manage daily to-do lists, plan out complex projects step by step, create detailed study schedules,
outline research papers, categorize notes. For language learning, especially at an advanced level where you're juggling grammar, vocab, listening, speaking, they could be amazing. You could use them to, say, categorize new vocabulary by theme, link grammar exercises to specific rules, schedule spaced repetition reviews, or even outline arguments for a debate club practice.
It helps bring order to the chaos, streamlines the process.
And then there are tools specifically for language that act as cognitive enhancers. Think about sophisticated grammar checkers.
Like Grammarly or maybe Pro Writing Aid. They go way beyond basic spell check now.
Oh, definitely. They give real-time feedback on sentence structure, word choice, clarity, conciseness, even things like the tone of your writing.
And the key is it's not just about clicking accept suggestion. You have to engage with it, right?
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
You look at the suggestion and think, okay, why is it suggesting I change that? Oh, I see, using an active verb here makes it punchier. Or, this phrase is a bit redundant. How can I say it more directly?
That analytical process helps you internalize the patterns. You learn from the feedback, improving your writing beyond just that one document.
Then you've got learning apps that deliberately incorporate ideas from cognitive science, like Duolingo or Memrise. using spaced repetition for vocabulary.
Right, that's the idea that reviewing information at increasing intervals helps lodge it in long-term memory more effectively.
Exactly. It's based on how our memory actually seems to work. The app figures out when you're likely to forget a word and prompts you just before that happens. It's efficient.
This ties into something called cognitive load theory, doesn't it?
It does. The basic idea is that our working memory, the mental space where we actively process information, is limited. Learning happens best when we don't overload it.
So if a tool handles the mundane stuff like organizing notes or catching simple typos,
It reduces what's called extraneous cognitive load. That's the mental effort spent on things other than the actual learning task.
which frees up more of your precious brain power.
Precisely. More resources available for the difficult parts. Understanding complex concepts, analyzing texts, thinking creatively, figuring out tricky grammar.
And artificial intelligence takes this even further, potentially. AI tutors, for instance.
Yeah, the potential for personalization is huge. And AI could, in theory, adapt exercises to your specific weaknesses in real time.
Like if it notices you keep messing up, say, at the third conditional.
It could instantly generate a bunch of targeted practice exercises just on that specific structure, helping you master it faster because the practice is so focused.
There's even a neuroscientific angle mentioned, suggesting that interacting with these dynamic digital tools might stimulate brain pathways involved in learning and memory.
It's an emerging area, but the idea is that interactive, responsive environments might engage our brains differently, perhaps more effectively than just passively reading a textbook.
What about those brain training apps like Lumosity? There's always debate about those.
There is. The scientific consensus on whether they broadly improve intelligence is still out. But the material suggests they might at least encourage specific cognitive skills like focus, mental flexibility, or task switching.
And there's an interesting idea about combining them with language practice.
Right. Imagine doing a visual puzzle on one of these apps, but at the same time, you have to describe your strategy out loud in English.
Wow, that sounds hard. Forcing your brain to juggle visual processing, problem solving, and linguistic output simultaneously.
Exactly. It builds both cognitive agility and the ability to think on your feet linguistically. Good practice for real-world situations like fast-paced meetings or giving impromptu answers.
The case study using a grammar tool really drives this home. A learner uses something like Grammarly on an essay.
And instead of just accepting changes, they analyze them. Why is this passive sentence flagged? How can I make it active? Why is this word considered vague? What's a more precise alternative?
That active analysis helps them internalize more advanced vocabulary, sophisticated grammar, and clearer writing principles. It's cognitive augmentation in action.
Okay, beyond individual tools, technology has also revolutionized how we connect and collaborate across the globe. This is another huge boost for intellectual growth.
We're all pretty used to Zoom, Teams, Google Meet now, aren't we?
Totally. These platforms just erase distance. You can have a real-time conversation with someone on the other side of the planet,
Including native English speakers you might never meet otherwise.
which provides incredibly valuable practice in spontaneous, real conversation. It's one thing to practice dialogues from a book.
It's quite another to react to unexpected questions, express complex thoughts on the fly, navigate misunderstandings, all in real time. That's where real fluency develops.
And platforms like Tandem or HelloTalk are built specifically for that language exchange.
Connecting you with peers internationally, right? For practice.
Yeah, through text, audio, video, whatever works. And doing that exposes you to a huge variety of accents, slang, colloquialisms, cultural nuances, and communication.
Things you just don't get from standard learning materials. It really refines your listening skills and your ability to adapt your own speaking.
Imagine discussing a complex topic like, say, global economic policy or cultural differences with someone from a completely different background. You're pushed to articulate sophisticated ideas and understand diverse perspectives.
Even social media platforms like X or Reddit can be places for intellectual exchange, despite their issues.
Definitely. There are countless online communities focused on specific academic subjects, professional fields, even hobbies that require complex discussion.
Participating in those forums means practicing written argumentation, responding thoughtfully to others, engaging in debate.
You learn to express yourself clearly, often adhering to the specific norms or standards of that particular community. It's practice in adapting your communication style.
Collaborative platforms also show this power. Things like GitHub, where developers work together on code.
Or Zooniverse, where ordinary people contribute to real scientific research by classifying images or transcribing data. citizen science.
Engaging with those kinds of platforms builds specialized vocabulary, sometimes highly technical language, and participating forces you to describe complex things precisely.
And this whole idea of virtual communities fostering cultural exchange comes up again. You're constantly encountering English as a global language, used in countless different ways by people from diverse backgrounds.
That prepares you so well for the reality of using English in international settings, and it builds intercultural competence, which is a really valuable skill.
The language exchange case study makes this point strongly. Regular chats with a native speaker don't just polish your grammar, they teach you natural expressions, conversational flow, rhythm, intonation.
It boosts your confidence and your practical ability to actually use the language in real situations.
And finally, technology is profoundly reshaping learning itself, strongly backing the idea of lifelong learning, which is becoming essential, right? The world changes so fast.
Absolutely. You can't just stop learning after school anymore.
And technology provides amazing resources for this. Think about online certifications or professional development courses.
Platforms like LinkedIn Learning, Coursera again, Google's career certificates.
These let you learn entirely new job skills. Digital marketing, data analysis, project management, you name it, often while improving your English at the same time.
Because the courses are often in English, using the specific terminology of that field.
Exactly. You're learning the skill and learning how to talk and write about it professionally in English. You pick up industry jargon, practice writing reports or emails in that context.
Just learning to navigate all these different platforms and software interfaces, that itself builds a kind of mental flexibility, doesn't it?
It does. It's like constantly adapting to new tools, which mirrors the real world where you always have to adjust your approach, your communication for different situations or audiences.
Technology also makes interdisciplinary learning much easier. You could be studying, say, artificial intelligence using English resources, broadening both your tech knowledge and your advanced English vocabulary simultaneously.
And the material mentions micro-credentials too. Shorter, really focused online courses.
Like getting a specific certificate in maybe social media advertising?
Yeah, something very targeted. It teaches you the practical skills and the specific language, the buzzwords, the concepts used in that niche.
The case study about an online course on presentation skills is a great example. You learn how to structure a talk, use persuasive language, handle visuals, engage an audience.
All through online modules and maybe practice sessions, it directly improves high-value communication skills and confidence, showing how tech supports very practical, ongoing learning.
Okay, wow. So we've built a pretty strong case for technology as this incredible engine for learning and intellectual growth. The access, the tools, the connections, the lifelong learning support, it's really compelling.
It absolutely is. The potential is enormous.
And it's a big but. The material is very clear that there's another side to the coin. The very things that make technology so convenient and powerful
Can also potentially lead to a kind of intellectual laziness, mental complacency.
This is where that term cognitive offloading comes in, right?
Yes, that's presented as a central mechanism for how technology might inadvertently make us, well, lazier thinkers.
So it's about how we use it, not just that we use it.
That's the key idea. It's about relying too much on external tools for tasks our brains could do and perhaps should do for exercise.
Like reaching for the calculator for simple sums you used to do in your head.
Or relying totally on spell check without ever thinking about the spelling rules yourself. Or using GPS for every single journey without trying to build a mental map.
And the argument is, if you constantly outsource that mental effort, the underlying skill doesn't get practiced and potentially weakens.
Precisely. Mental muscles need exercise, just like physical ones. If you never do mental arithmetic, you get rusty. If you don't consciously engage with spelling or navigation, those abilities might fade.
And for language learners, the risk is over-relying on things like translation apps or AI writing assistants.
Yes. These tools can be fantastic aids, don't get me wrong. But if you use them to completely bypass the struggle of figuring out grammar or memorizing vocabulary yourself,
You miss the actual learning part. You get the answer instantly, but you skip the valuable mental process of working it out.
the material brings in the dual process theory from cognitive science here, often linked with Daniel Kahneman.
System 1 and System 2 thinking.
That's the one. System 1 is fast, intuitive, automatic, recognizing faces, understanding simple sentences. System 2 is slow, effortful, analytical, solving complex problems, writing essays, deep analysis.
And the worry is that text convenience pushes us toward relying too much on the easy, automatic System 1.
And neglecting the harder but crucial System 2 thinking that's necessary for deep learning and critical thought. Quick answers feel good, but they don't always build deep understanding.
This connects to the impact of all the bite-sized content too, right? Short videos, social media feeds.
Yes, the constant stream of easily digestible, rapidly changing information. Our brains get used to that quick-hit novelty.
Which can make it genuinely harder to focus on things that require sustained attention.
Absolutely. Things like reading a long, dense academic article, working through a complex novel, or even following a detailed argument in a lecture. Our focus muscles get weak.
There's research mentioned on deep reading, that immersive focused reading, where you really analyze and connect with the text.
And the suggestion is that our common online habit of skimming, scanning, jumping around might actually be eroding our ability to do that kind of deep reading.
Which is a major concern if your goal involves understanding complex ideas, literature, or even just subtle nuances in advanced language use.
And the subtopic on memory links back to cognitive offloading too. If we know we can instantly look up anything, do we bother remembering it?
Relying on digital notes, reminders, search engines, it might mean our own working memory doesn't get the workout it needs.
That's the potential risk. The act of actively retrieving information from your own memory strengthens that memory. If you always relied on an external device, that strengthening process doesn't happen as much.
So you might struggle more to recall vocabulary or grammar rules when you don't have the tool, like in an exam or a spontaneous chat.
Which is why strategies like using traditional flashcards sometimes, or deliberately practicing recall without looking at your notes, can still be really valuable.
The case study on overusing translation apps illustrates this perfectly. You face a tricky sentence in English, you plug it into a translator, get the gist quickly.
But you bypass the valuable work of analyzing the structure, guessing word meanings from context, looking up individual words to understand their full meaning.
It gives you a fast answer, but it doesn't build your independent reading comprehension skills nearly as effectively. It highlights that need for balance use tools, but don't let them replace the core effort.
Okay, so beyond just making us maybe passively consume information, could technology also be undermining our ability to solve problems independently?
Like, if AI can write the essay for you or draft the email.
You might skip the crucial thinking steps involved. Structuring the argument, synthesizing information yourself, finding your own unique angle or solution.
And relying on templates for everything, presentations, reports, even creative work could lead to less originality.
It could. If everyone uses the same framework, things start to look the same.
Yeah.
And it might leave you less prepared when you face a problem that needs a completely fresh, custom approach.
There's also a point about automation in the workplace. If machines handle all the routine problem solving,
do humans get fewer chances to build those skills themselves? Skills like resilience, creative thinking, adaptability that come from tackling challenges. It could limit practice in harder to automate areas like negotiation or strategic analysis.
And this ease of finding answers online fosters that copy-paste mentality sometimes.
That's a real concern. It's so easy to find something and just reproduce it, which challenges intellectual honesty and the development of genuine understanding and original thought.
The subtopic on creativity directly addresses this. If we lean too heavily on AI for content generation,
does it stifle our own creative spark? Especially if you're trying to develop your own voice, your own style, say, in writing. Simply using AI output isn't really your creation.
The suggestion is maybe use AI for brainstorming, getting ideas flowing.
But then do the actual crafting yourself. Inject your own personality, your perspective, your unique way of saying things.
The AI-generated essay case study makes this point well. The output might be flawless grammatically,
but it often lacks that spark, that personal insight, that unexpected connection that makes writing truly compelling and original. Using AI as a starting point, maybe for an outline, but then writing it yourself leads to a far better, more intellectually engaging result. Then we move into the social and emotional side effects. The idea that spending so much time interacting via screens might reduce face-to-face time.
Which has obvious implications for practicing spoken language, right?
Huge implications. Less real-world conversation means less practice with fluency, pronunciation, intonation, reading body language.
And those subtle conversational skills like turn-taking, interrupting politely, understanding tone of voice.
Things that are really hard to learn from a screen alone. And some research suggests that primarily text-based communication might even chip away at empathy, because you miss all those nonverbal cues.
Empathy being so important for understanding different viewpoints and having nuanced conversations.
And then there's the issue of social media algorithms creating echo chambers.
Where you mostly see stuff that confirms what you already believe.
Exactly. It connects you with like-minded people and filters out opposing views, which feels comfortable, but
It limits your exposure to diverse perspectives. It makes it harder to grapple with complex issues where there isn't one easy answer. It can kind of stunt your intellectual growth by keeping you in a bubble.
And psychologically, the constant notifications, likes, shares, they create this dopamine feedback loop.
Giving you little bursts of pleasure, making you want to keep checking.
Yes, and that prioritizes instant gratification over the sustained, sometimes difficult effort needed to truly master something complex, like a language.
The subtopic on emotional intelligence connects back to empathy. Fewer rich, face-to-face interactions might mean fewer opportunities to develop this crucial skill.
Whereas actively practicing empathy in real conversations builds communication competence. That's why complementing online learning with offline things like study groups or real-world meetups can be so valuable. It fosters emotional connection too.
The echo chamber case study is revealing. If you only follow sources that agree with you, you miss out on encountering new ideas, new vocabulary, and new ways of arguing.
Deliberately seeking out different viewpoints, even ones you disagree with, forces you to think more critically and practice articulating more balanced, nuanced arguments.
And finally, perhaps the most common complaint, digital distraction and fragmented attention.
Oh, the constant battle. Notifications popping up, the urge to quickly check email or social media, juggling multiple tabs and apps.
It makes sustained focus incredibly difficult.
And research confirms it. These interruptions increase cognitive load. Every time you switch tasks, your brain has to reorient, which takes effort and time. It reduces efficiency.
And it makes it hard to stay coherent when you're doing something complex, like writing a detailed analysis or even just following a long conversation.
Plus, the very design of many platforms is addictive, engineered to keep you clicking, which can easily lead to procrastination.
You sit down to study, and suddenly an hour has vanished down a rabbit hole of cat videos or news headlines.
It undermines the discipline needed for deep work. The subtopic on attention span notes this widespread concern and stresses that focus is a skill we now need to actively train.
Techniques like the Pomodoro method focused work, bursts, then breaks, or creating tech-free study zones.
Exactly. Conscious strategies to fight back against distraction and build concentration, which is vital for things like exams or timed writing tasks.
The notification overload case study shows this clearly. Someone struggling with a timed task because their phone keeps buzzing.
Simply turning off notifications and maybe using a focus app makes a dramatic difference. Better concentration, better quality work in the allotted time.
Okay, so we've really dug into both sides now. The incredible potential of technology to boost our intellect and the very real risks of it encouraging mental laziness or fragmentation. It truly seems like a double-edged sword.
It really does. It's not a simple good or bad situation. It's all about the balance, the interaction between the user and the tool.
Which puts the focus squarely on us, the users. It's about being intentional, strategic in how we engage with technology.
Absolutely. It's about actively choosing to use these powerful tools to our advantage while consciously guarding against the potential downsides.
So revisiting those positive examples, vocabulary apps, online courses, their real value depends on how you use them. Are you actively engaging or just passively consuming?
And it means deliberately seeking out high-quality, challenging material online. Not just the easy stuff, engaging with it critically.
And crucially, making sure you still do the work yourself sometimes. Independent practice.
Yes. Writing without leaning too heavily on AI, having conversations without scripts, trying to solve problems with your own brain first before reaching for a digital shortcut, maintaining that independent effort.
Educators play a big role here too, designing tasks that require critical thinking with technology, not just using it passively.
Like analyzing online sources for bias, collaborating on complex virtual projects, using tools creatively.
And maybe even encouraging reflection. Just thinking about your own tech use, how did it help or hinder you today, can build awareness.
The idea of blended learning really captures this balance, combining the best of both worlds.
Using digital tools for their strengths, maybe efficient drills, access to lectures.
But combining them with offline methods, face-to-face discussion, problem solving, with pen and paper, real-world practice, it creates a more robust, holistic approach.
The blended learning case study showed that perfectly apt for drills plus conversation group led to gains in both specific skills and overall fluency.
Looking bigger picture, at work and society, technology reshapes things constantly. Automation might free us up for creativity.
But we need to make sure core skills don't atrophy. And mastering digital communication emails, virtual meetings, collaboration platforms is just essential now for most jobs.
And we can't forget the digital divide. Unequal access is still a major barrier to opportunity for many people worldwide.
Understanding that issue, being able to talk about it, advocating for digital equity, that's part of being an informed citizen too.
The workplace communication subtopic highlights adapting your style formal emails versus quick chats. And the virtual presentation case study shows how tech itself can be used to practice and refine those vital professional skills.
So a lot of it comes down to mindful technology use, being conscious, being intentional.
Setting boundaries, turning off those notifications when you need to focus, scheduling tech time instead of letting it constantly interrupt, maybe limiting recreational screen time.
It's about taking control rather than letting the tech control you.
And deliberately engaging with challenging online content. Reading long articles, tackling complex digital texts, building mental resilience against that pull of easy gratification.
And underpinning all of this is digital literacy, not just knowing how to click buttons,
but understanding algorithms, critically evaluating sources, spotting misinformation, understanding bias. These skills are paramount.
Because they translate directly into core intellectual skills like analysis, synthesis, argumentation. Being able to weigh evidence from different sources is fundamental.
The digital literacy subtopic emphasizes this, evaluating content, comparing sources. The case study showed how systematically doing that improves analytical writing.
And briefly, there are psychological aspects too. Information overload leading to decision fatigue.
Yeah, choosing which tool or resource to use can be overwhelming. Having clear goals helps manage that.
And culturally, tech exposes us to global English and diverse cultures, which is great.
But we also need to actively seek diversity to avoid those filter bubbles and homogenization.
Psychological resilience comes into using techniques like mindfulness to manage digital overload, stay focused.
The mindfulness case study showed how breaks for focus helped with concentration and stress on demanding tasks.
So wrapping this all up, the big picture seems clear. The question, smarter or lazier, doesn't have a simple answer. It's complicated.
It really is. Technology offers incredible empowerment, but it also presents genuine risks. It's a dynamic interplay.
We've seen how it can massively enhance intellect. That amazing access to knowledge, tools that augment cognition, global collaboration, support for lifelong learning.
But we've also seen the potential downsides. Cognitive offloading, maybe weaker problem-solving skills, social impacts, constant distraction.
So the real takeaway, the crucial point for you listening, seems to be that the outcome isn't automatic. It depends entirely on how you choose to use the technology.
It's about consciously deciding to use these tools to expand your mind, sharpen your skills, engage deeply with ideas, connect meaningfully.
While at the same time, actively protecting and nurturing your own independent thinking, your critical faculties, your ability to focus.
Developing mindful habits, using balanced approaches, building strong digital literacy. These are the keys to making sure technology serves your growth.
Rather than letting it lead you down a path of comfortable mental stagnation.
And that final thought is really powerful. The choice is ultimately yours. Every day, with every interaction. Will you wield technology intentionally to learn and understand more deeply?
Or will you let its conveniences lull you into complacency? It's a constant negotiation, isn't it? But navigating it thoughtfully is how you get smarter, learn better, and communicate more effectively in this connected world.
Thinking critically about your own technology use is such a vital part of that learning journey. If you found this exploration interesting and want to dive deeper into more topics with us, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. You've joined us for a new deep dive.
Great to be diving in.
Today we're tackling a question that's, well, it's truly fundamental, isn't it? Something that shapes our experience of the world in ways we probably rarely even stop to consider.
Absolutely. We're talking about how language, the very tool we use constantly, influences the way we think and perceive reality itself.
It's such a powerful concept. We use language every single waking moment, but its influence seems to go so much deeper than just, forming sentences.
It really does. It's deeply intertwined with our internal landscape, our cognition, how we process everything around us.
And in this deep dive, we're going to be exploring this really intricate relationship, looking at it from lots of different angles. We've got some fascinating insights to draw on that really push us to look closer at language.
Yeah, beyond just communication.
Exactly. Our mission here is to unpack these ideas together, understand not just that language affects thought, which maybe seems intuitive, but how it does it and why. We'll be digging into some surprising details, some unexpected connections.
And hopefully making it all clear and relevant for you, our listener, helping you navigate information, communication, maybe even your own thoughts with a bit more awareness of these underlying mechanics.
Right. Let's get started. Let's begin this exploration.
Okay, where should we start? The foundations.
Yeah, let's unpack this relationship, starting with the big foundational ideas in this field. And the starting point for so much of this discussion often seems to be the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Ah, yes, Sapir-Whorf. Named after the linguists Edward Sapir and his student Benjamin Lee Whorf. They were really pioneers back in the day, suggesting that the structure of a language doesn't just mirror reality.
It does more than reflect.
They proposed it might actively shape how its speakers perceive and think about that reality. A pretty radical idea at the time.
And I think I remember reading this hypothesis isn't just one single thing. It's usually talked about in two forms, a stronger one and a weaker one.
That's the common way to frame it, yes. The stronger version is called linguistic determinism. And, well, it's quite radical.
How radical are we talking?
It basically posits that language entirely determines thought, completely dictates it. In this view, the structure and vocabulary of your language set the absolute boundaries of what you're even capable of thinking or understanding.
Wow. Hold on, so if your language doesn't have a specific word or, say, a grammatical structure for a concept, you just couldn't think that concept at all. That feels incredibly limiting.
It does feel limiting, doesn't it? And that's precisely why this strong version, linguistic determinism, is largely, well, not accepted in modern linguistics or cognitive science.
Why not? What's the evidence against it?
The empirical evidence just doesn't really support it.
Yeah.
Humans clearly demonstrate the capacity to think about concepts that are difficult to put into words in their native language. We can imagine things beyond our current linguistic toolkit. We can borrow words. We can create new ones to express novel ideas.
Right, like inventing scientific terms or finding ways to talk about new technologies.
Exactly. Thought isn't strictly caged by language in that absolute deterministic sense. People can think outside the linguistic box, so to speak.
Okay, so linguistic determinism is maybe more of a historical starting point, a sort of extreme position to react against.
You could see it that way. It pushed the conversation forward.
So the weaker version is the one that holds more water today.
Correct. That's linguistic relativity. This version is much more nuanced. It proposes that language doesn't strictly determine thought, but it influences it.
Influence, not determination. Okay.
Yeah, it guides, it biases, it affects our cognitive processes to varying degrees. It might make certain ways of thinking easier or faster, or perhaps more habitual for speakers of one language compared to another.
So it kind of nudges your thinking in certain directions.
That's a good way to put it. And this version, linguistic relativity, is supported by a pretty significant body of empirical evidence that's been gathered over many decades of research.
That distinction, influence versus determination, feels really crucial here.
It is. It's the core of the modern debate.
And Whorf himself, didn't he offer examples to try and illustrate this influence? I remember something about his work on the Hopi language.
Yes, Whorf did spend time studying the Hopi language, spoken by a Native American group in the southwestern U.S. He famously contrasted its structure, particularly how it dealt with time, with languages like English.
How did he see them as different?
Well, English, like many Indo-European languages, uses explicit tense markers, very heavily past, present, future. We have verb conjugations, specific adverbs of time.
Like yesterday, today, tomorrow?
Exactly. They clearly partition time into these distinct segments. And this grammatical structure often leads us to conceptualize time as, well, a linear sequence, like a timeline stretching from the past through the present moment and into the future.
Yeah, we even talk about saving time, spending time, running out of time, like it's a commodity or a line we move along.
Precisely. Whorf, observing Hopi, suggested their language placed much less emphasis on these distinct, bounded temporal segments. He argued that Hopi grammar focused more on things like duration, intensity, and the ongoing or cyclical nature of events.
Cyclical, like seasons, day and night.
Think about natural cycles, yes. He suggested that their language, by not structurally forcing speakers to constantly chop time into past, present, future boxes in the same way English does, might encourage a different cognitive feel for time, perhaps more like a continuous unfolding process.
A continuous flow rather than a segmented line.
That was Whorf's proposal. Now, it's important to say his interpretation of Hopi has been debated quite a bit by later linguists. Some question the accuracy of his analysis.
So it's controversial.
The specifics of the Hopi case are, yes, But the core idea that the way a language structures time grammatically can bias how its speakers think about time, that idea has actually found support in more modern controlled research.
Ah, okay. So the principle might hold even if the original example is debated. And that modern research you mentioned, some of it is really compelling, right? Like the studies by Lera Boroditsky on how different languages use spatial metaphors for time.
Yes, Boroditsky's work provides some of the clearest, most direct experimental evidence for linguistic relativity in action, especially regarding abstract concepts like time.
So how does that work? What did she find?
Well, think about how we talk about time in English. We overwhelmingly use horizontal spatial metaphors. We look forward to the future, we think back on the past, we put unpleasant things behind us.
Right, time moves forward, like along a line in front of us. Or maybe left to right on a calendar.
A horizontal axis, essentially. Now, compare this to Mandarin Chinese. While Mandarin speakers can use horizontal metaphors, they also very commonly use vertical metaphors for time.
Vertical? How does that work?
The word for up, sheng, can refer to the previous week or month, and the word for down, shaf, can refer to the next week or month.
Wait, so past is up, future is down. That flips our usual spatial understanding completely.
It does, doesn't it? Past events are up, future events are down, like time is stacked vertically.
Okay, that's fascinating linguistically, but did it affect how people think?
That's what Boroditsky tested. She ran experiments where she presented Mandarin and English speakers with questions about temporal relationships, like asking if March comes earlier than April. Crucially, sometimes the visual prompt was arranged vertically and sometimes horizontally.
And what happened?
She found that Mandarin speakers were consistently faster at correctly answering these time questions if the visual information was presented along a vertical axis. English speakers, on the other hand, were faster if it was presented along a horizontal axis.
Wow, seriously. So the common way your language talks about time using space horizontally for English, often vertically for Mandarin, actually influences how quickly your brain processes that information when it's laid out spatially.
That's exactly what the findings suggest. It indicates that our habitual linguistic framing of abstract concepts like time isn't just, a cute way of talking. It can subtly influence the underlying cognitive processing, the efficiency with which we handle related information.
That's really where it gets interesting for me. It's not just abstract philosophy, it's measurable differences in cognitive speed.
Exactly. It's strong evidence that language doesn't just label our thoughts. It can actively participate in shaping how those thoughts are processed.
Which leads us nicely into maybe a more obvious way language shapes thought. Vocabulary. The actual words we have.
Vocabulary is definitely the most intuitive connection for many people. The words available in your language are, essentially, the primary tools you use to define, categorize, and make sense of the reality around you.
And if you don't have a ready-made word for something,
it's often harder to talk about it easily, maybe harder to mentally isolate it as a distinct concept, or perhaps less likely to notice it in the first place.
And languages differ hugely in their vocabularies, don't they? Especially in specific areas or domains, this idea of lexical specificity.
That's the term, yes. Different languages carve up the world differently with their words. They have varying levels of detail in their vocabulary for particular domains that are perhaps culturally important or environmentally relevant.
And this difference in detail can really influence perception.
Significantly. It influences how speakers perceive and categorize things within that specific domain.
The classic example that always comes up here is color.
It's a fantastic example because color perception itself, the physics and physiology of seeing light wavelengths, is universal. But how we categorize those colors into words is definitely not.
Right. So in English, we basically have one common word for blue. We can say light blue or dark blue, but the core word is blue.
Correct. But as numerous studies have highlighted, Russian makes a mandatory distinction. It has two separate basic color terms for what English speakers generally just call blue. Sini for darker blues and Goluboy for lighter blues.
They're not just modifiers like light or dark, they're considered fundamentally different color categories in Russian.
That's right. They're as distinct as, say, red and pink might feel to an English speaker. Russian speakers are linguistically trained from childhood to see these as two core categories.
Okay, so the languages are different. Does it change how they see blue?
This is where Boroditsky's research comes in again. Her studies, and others, confirmed that this linguistic distinction has real cognitive consequences. They tested Russian and English speakers on their ability to discriminate between different shades of blue. They found that Russian speakers were measurably faster at telling the difference between two shades of blue if those shades happened to fall across the city-Goluboy boundary, compared to discriminating between two shades that were equally different in wavelength but fell within the same Russian category. English speakers showed no such speed advantage at that specific boundary.
Whoa! So they literally perceive the difference more quickly because their language has given them separate labels? That's the categorical perception thing?
That's it precisely. Having a linguistic boundary seems to enhance your perceptual sensitivity at that boundary. Your language primes you, makes you quicker to notice and respond to distinctions that are encoded in your vocabulary. It sharpens your perception in very specific language-relevant ways.
That is a powerful demonstration. Vocabulary isn't just for talking. It genuinely shapes how quickly or easily we perceive the physical world. Amazing. What's another really compelling example of this?
Well, one that really highlights the connection between language, environment, and cognition is the Gugu Yimithirr language.
Gugu Yimithirr.
Yeah.
Spoken by an Aboriginal community in Australia, right? What's unique about their language?
What's fascinating is their system for talking about space and direction. Unlike English, which relies heavily on egocentric directions, relative terms like left, right, and front, me, behind you.
Things relative to our own bodies.
Yes. Gugu Yimithirr speakers use cardinal directions north, south, east, west almost exclusively, even for small-scale space.
So instead of saying the cup is to your right, they'd have to say something like the cup is northeast of you.
Essentially, yes, or the ant is crawling south on your leg. And this isn't just for navigating large landscapes. It applies to everyday conversation about objects right there in a room, or even on your own body. You wouldn't say, move your chair a bit to the left.
You'd say, move your chair a bit to the west.
Correct. Assuming that's the correct cardinal direction at that moment.
Good grief. That requires you to know where north, south, east, and west are constantly, every single moment.
It absolutely does. This linguistic structure imposes a constant cognitive demand to maintain absolute spatial orientation. You have to know your cardinal directions wherever you are, indoors or outdoors.
That sounds exhausting. But does it? Does it make them better at navigating?
Phenomenally better, according to research by anthropologist Stephen Levinson, who worked extensively with Gugu Yimithirr speakers. His studies show they possess extraordinary spatial reasoning and navigational abilities.
Just because their language forces them to think that way.
They are significantly better at tasks like dead reckoning, knowing your position, and navigating without landmarks or maps, relying purely on an internal sense of direction and distance traveled, compared to speakers of languages like English that rely on relative egocentric directions.
So it's not just a separate skill they learn. The language itself trains this ability.
It seems deeply integrated. The linguistic necessity of constant cardinal orientation appears to profoundly enhance their spatial cognition in a way that our egocentric language doesn't require or foster to nearly the same degree. Their vocabulary and grammar for space fundamentally alter their moment-to-moment spatial awareness and long-range navigation skills.
That is genuinely mind-blowing. The words you use for space literally make you better at moving through space. Okay, so we've seen individual words, lexical categories matter. What about the grammar, the rules for putting words together? How does that shape thinking?
Grammar, the structural rules of language, influences how we process and organize information in ways that are often more subtle and sometimes mandatory. Grammar dictates what information we must include or pay attention to when we construct a sentence.
How does that work? Can you give an example of grammar nudging thought?
A frequently cited example is grammatical gender, like in German or Spanish. Every noun in German is assigned one of three genders: masculine der, feminine, die, or neuter das.
And these genders are often arbitrary, right? Like a key isn't inherently male or a bridge inherently female.
Exactly. Der Schlüssel, the key, is masculine.
Yeah.
Die Brücke, the bridge, is feminine. It's a purely linguistic feature, not based on the object's actual properties.
Okay, so it's a grammatical requirement. Does it do anything to how people think about keys or bridges?
Well, that's what researchers like Boroditsky investigated. They asked German speakers and Spanish speakers where the word for bridge, el puente, is masculine to describe various objects, including a bridge.
Using adjectives.
Yes, and they found a consistent difference related to the grammatical gender in each language.
Yeah.
German speakers, whose word for bridge, die Brücke, is feminine, tended to use adjectives often associated with femininity to describe it.
Like?
Words like beautiful, elegant, delicate, slender, fragile.
And the Spanish speakers, with their masculine el puente.
They were significantly more likely to use adjectives typically associated with masculinity, like strong, sturdy, big, tall, long, dangerous.
For the same kind of object, just described in a different language with a different grammatical gender.
Precisely. So the seemingly arbitrary linguistic gender assigned to a noun in your language appears to subtly bias the way you conceptualize the inherent qualities or characteristics of that object.
It's not conscious, but the constant linguistic pairing somehow colors perception.
That's the interpretation, yes. It's a fascinating glimpse into how an abstract grammatical feature can have tangible cognitive correlates, subtly shaping our associations.
That is remarkable. Your language's grammar isn't just about putting sentences together correctly. It can add this layer of almost personality or conceptual nuance to every single noun you use. What's another grammatical feature that has this kind of impact?
Another really interesting one is evidentiality. This is a grammatical feature found in languages like Turkish, among others.
Evidentiality, what does that mean?
It means the grammar requires you to specify the source of your knowledge when you make a statement, particularly about past events. In English, you can just say, he left the party.
Right, you don't have to say how you know that.
You could add, I saw him leave, or apparently he left, or Sarah told me he left, but those are optional additions. They aren't built into the verb structure itself.
Okay, so how is Turkish different?
In Turkish, the verb ending itself often must indicate how you acquired the information. There are different grammatical markers, different suffixes on the verb, depending on whether you witnessed the event directly, whether you inferred it from evidence, like his coat is gone, whether you heard it reported by someone else, or whether it's general knowledge.
So just saying the equivalent of he left in Turkish would automatically tell the listener how you know he left just by the form of the verb.
In many contexts, yes. The grammar forces you to encode the source of your evidence.
Wow. And how might that shape cognition? What's the implication?
Well, the argument is that this constant grammatical requirement might lead Turkish speakers to develop different cognitive habits or priorities concerning information sourcing, reliability, and evidence compared to English speakers for whom specifying the source is optional.
They're constantly, perhaps subconsciously, evaluating the basis for their statements because their language demands it.
That's the idea. It could foster a heightened sensitivity to evidence and how knowledge is acquired. This is sometimes called grammaticalized cognition, where a particular cognitive process seems to be woven into the very fabric of the language's grammar, making it almost obligatory.
That's a powerful concept, grammar forcing you into a specific cognitive routine, like constantly checking your sources. It really makes you wonder what subtle processes our own English grammar might be imposing on us without us even realizing it.
It certainly does. It opens up a whole field of inquiry. And beyond these specific rules and words, language is also, of course, deeply intertwined with culture. It acts as a kind of cultural lens.
Right. The materials talked about language as a cultural lens. How does that work?
Language serves as a massive repository, a storehouse of a culture's shared values, beliefs, history, and ways of seeing the world. These aren't just in dictionaries. They're embedded in idioms, proverbs, metaphors, the connotations of words, and the very concepts the language makes easy or hard to express.
And these linguistic features don't just reflect the culture.
They also actively shape thought by reinforcing those cultural priorities and perspectives every time they're used. They make certain ways of thinking feel more natural or obvious within that cultural context.
The English idiom, time is money, seems like a perfect example of this.
That's a classic one, absolutely. This phrase, so common in many English-speaking cultures, really embodies a particular cultural emphasis on efficiency, productivity, and viewing time as a quantifiable, valuable resource that needs to be managed, saved, spent wisely.
And using that phrase, hearing it often, it reinforces that way of thinking about time.
It can subtly influence speakers to prioritize tasks, schedule their lives, and even judge others' use of time based on this underlying metaphor of time as a commodity.
And if you contrast that with a different cultural perspective, the materials mention the Spanish word mañana.
Yes, mañana, literally tomorrow, is often associated, sometimes stereotypically, with a more relaxed approach to time, less urgency than implied by time is money.
But we need to be careful with that, right? Not oversimplify.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely crucial to approach this with nuance. Languages and cultures are incredibly complex. Associating an entire cultural attitude with a single word risks falling into harmful stereotypes. Not every Spanish speaker is laid back about deadlines.
Okay.
But the linguistic association itself, the cultural discourse around the word, might reflect a different historical or contextual emphasis regarding time management within certain Spanish-speaking cultures, even if it doesn't define every individual. It points to a different cultural conversation about time.
Got it. It's about understanding how these linguistic touchstones can signal cultural values or tendencies without using them to paint everyone with the same brush.
Precisely. Another really strong cultural example, which connects back to vocabulary, is the richness of words related to snow in Inuit languages.
Ah, yes, the many words for snow idea.
Right. Now, the exact number is often exaggerated in popular accounts, and it's a complex linguistic debate about what counts as a word. But setting aside the specific number, there's no question that these languages possess a much richer, more differentiated vocabulary for various types and conditions of snow and ice than, say, English typically does.
And that lexical richness isn't just for show, it's directly tied to their environment and survival, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. This extensive vocabulary allows speakers to make very fine, crucial distinctions between snow that's good for building igloos, snow that's dangerous to travel on, falling snow, drifting snow, slushy snow, hard-packed snow.
Distinctions that could be life or death in the Arctic.
Exactly. The language focuses the speaker's attention on these environmental nuances, reinforcing essential cultural knowledge and adaptive behaviors necessary for survival. It's a clear case where the language has evolved hand in hand with cultural needs and, in turn, shapes the perception of the environment to highlight what's culturally vital.
The language trains you to see the world in the way your culture needs you to see it.
And think about languages with fundamentally different structures for word formation, like Arabic. Arabic uses a root-based morphology,
where many words are built from a common three-letter root.
Yes. For example, the root KTB is related to writing. From this root, you get kataba, he wrote, kitab, book, maktab, office or desk, katib, writer, and so on. The underlying root links all these concepts semantically.
Even though in English, write, book, and office seem like quite separate words.
Right. It's been argued by some scholars that this linguistic structure, which inherently highlights the interconnectedness of concepts derived from a common source, might reflect or even foster a cultural emphasis on holistic thinking, seeing the relationships and underlying unity between different ideas or domains.
So even the way words themselves are constructed could embody a cultural value like interconnectedness. Language really is like a deep cultural map etched into our minds.
It truly seems to be. And this cultural lens, embedded in language, also significantly shapes how we express and perhaps even how we experience our emotions.
This is where we get into those fascinating, untranslatable emotion words.
Exactly. Language provides the labels we use to identify, categorize, and communicate our internal feeling states. And some languages have evolved specific words for complex emotional experiences that lack a neat, single-word equivalent in other languages.
Like the German word Schadenfreude, a classic example.
Yes, that specific feeling of pleasure derived from witnessing someone else's misfortune. English speakers definitely understand the concept. We might even feel it, but we don't have one single common word that precisely captures it. We have to use a phrase.
Right. Or mono no aware from Japanese.
A beautiful term. It refers to a kind of poignant appreciation of the transient nature of things, a gentle sadness or bittersweet awareness of life's impermanence and fleeting beauty. It's a complex blend. Beauty, empathy, sadness, acceptance. Very hard to capture concisely in English.
And saudade in Portuguese?
Saudade. A deep, often melancholic longing or nostalgia for something or someone absent, maybe something that can never be recovered. It carries connotations of love, loss, distance, and yearning all wrapped together.
And what about the Danish concept of hygge? That one's become quite well known recently.
Hygge, yes. That feeling of cozy contentment, warmth, conviviality, enjoying simple, comfortable moments, often with loved ones, in a secure and pleasant atmosphere. It's more than just coziness, it's a cultural emphasis on actively creating and valuing that specific feeling state.
So the very existence of these specific words, does it suggest that speakers of those languages experience those feelings more often, or maybe more distinctly?
That's one plausible interpretation. Having a specific label might make that particular emotional configuration more salient, more recognizable, easier to identify, and perhaps even cultivate within that culture. It ties into research by psychologists like Lisa Feldman Barrett on emotional granularity.
Emotional granularity, what's that?
It refers to the ability to differentiate between emotional states with a high degree of specificity. Her research suggests that individuals who have a richer, more nuanced vocabulary for emotions, who can use more specific words beyond just basic ones like happy, sad, angry, are actually better at distinguishing subtle variations in their own feelings.
Does that have benefits?
Yes, this enhanced ability to label emotions accurately seems to be correlated with better emotional regulation, coping skills, and overall psychological well-being.
That's quite something. So having a more precise emotional vocabulary, provided partly by your language, could literally change your subjective experience of your feelings and how well you manage them.
The evidence points in that direction. It suggests that language provides crucial cognitive tools for parsing our internal emotional landscape more finely. And those untranslatable terms like HIG, they don't just name a feeling, they often reflect culturally valued emotional states or practices. HIG embodies a cultural encouragement to seek and cherish comfort, connection, and simple pleasures.
So language gives us the words for feelings, and those words can reflect and maybe even reinforce the cultural importance or framing of those feelings. It's definitely a two-way street.
It seems to be.
And this complex interplay between language, culture, and thought also extends to how we approach problems, doesn't it? Our reasoning styles.
It does seem to. The underlying structural patterns of language might predispose its speakers towards different cognitive styles when they engage in problem solving and reasoning.
How could the structure of a sentence influence something like how you solve a problem?
Well, let's consider languages like Chinese again. As we mentioned, they often rely heavily on context and frequently allow subjects of sentences to be omitted if they're clearly understood for the situation. This kind of flexible, context-dependent structure is sometimes linked to a preference for what researchers call holistic thinking.
Okay, what defines holistic thinking?
It's a cognitive style that tends to emphasize seeing the bigger picture, noticing patterns, relationships, and interdependencies between elements within a field. It's about focusing on the context in which things occur, rather than just isolating individual objects or actors.
Seeing the whole system, maybe?
That's a good way to think about it. Now compare that with English. English typically has a more rigid subject-verb-object structure. The dog subject, chased verb, the ball object.
We usually need that subject explicitly stated.
Generally, yes. And this structure is often associated with what's called analytical thinking. This style tends to focus more on individual agents performing actions on objects, breaking things down into discrete components, and emphasizing linear cause and effect relationships.
So one linguistic structure might subtly encourage seeing the forest, while the other encourages focusing more on the individual trees.
That's a pretty good analogy, yes. Research by cognitive scientists like Richard Nisbett has explored these kinds of differences quite extensively. His work suggests that individuals from East Asian linguistic backgrounds often demonstrate a preference for holistic reasoning styles.
How did they test that?
Through various tasks. For example, they might be quicker to notice relationships between objects in a complex visual scene, or pay more attention to situational factors when explaining social behavior. Western language speakers, including English speakers, tend to show, on average, a stronger inclination towards analytical reasoning, isolating objects from their background, categorizing them based on rules, and focusing on individual attributes.
Is there a simple illustration of this difference in perspective, like how someone might describe a scene?
Yes, imagine describing a picture of a fish swimming in a pond. A typical English speaker might focus on the main actor, the fish is swimming, or maybe a large fish swims quickly. The focus is on the subject and its action or attributes.
Okay. And a Chinese speaker?
A Chinese speaker might be somewhat more likely to frame it in terms of the context or relationship. Perhaps saying something closer to, there are fish in the pond, or inside the pond, fish swim. The description might start with the environment or emphasize the relationship between the fish and the pond.
That's subtle, but it does point towards a potentially different cognitive starting point, doesn't it? What you choose to mention first or emphasize.
Exactly. It's a subtle linguistic framing difference that might reflect a deeper difference in cognitive priorities, foregrounding the object versus foregrounding the context.
And how might these different styles, holistic versus analytical, influence something like decision-making?
Well, a more holistic thinker might be inclined to weigh systemic factors, potential ripple effects, and the broader context more heavily when making a decision. An analytical thinker might focus more sharply on the individual components, the primary agent involved, and the most direct cause and effect outcomes.
Neither approach is necessarily better or worse overall, right? They just represent different pathways.
Precisely. They're different cognitive strategies, potentially nudged or made more habitual by the patterns ingrained in one's language. It really makes you reflect on how the very syntax we use every day might be subtly steering our fundamental approach to understanding situations and figuring things out.
Absolutely. Now, for many people listening, this isn't just theoretical speculation about other languages. They might speak 2 or 3 or more languages themselves.
Yes, and multilingualism adds a whole other fascinating dimension to this entire discussion. Being bilingual or multilingual isn't just about knowing more words. It has demonstrable effects on cognition.
What kind of effects are we talking about?
Research consistently shows that bilingualism significantly enhances what are called executive functions. These are the high-level cognitive processes housed primarily in the prefrontal cortex that control and manage other cognitive abilities. They're like the brain's air traffic control system.
Okay, so managing multiple languages strengthens this control system. What specific improvements do we see?
Enhanced executive functions can lead to measurable improvements in several areas. Things like multitasking, juggling multiple streams of information or tasks simultaneously. Task switching, being able to flexibly shift attention between different activities or rule sets. Inhibitory control, the crucial ability to suppress irrelevant information or automatic responses. And cognitive flexibility in general, adapting to new situations, rules, or perspectives more easily.
So the constant mental gymnastics of selecting one language, inhibiting the other, switching back and forth, it actually trains these core cognitive skills.
That's the leading hypothesis, yes. It provides ongoing, demanding cognitive exercise for these executive control networks. And beyond that, some studies also link bilingualism to increased creativity and better perspective-taking abilities.
That makes sense. Constantly navigating different linguistic viewpoints might make you better at seeing things from different angles.
It seems plausible. Furthermore, research by Ellen Bialystock, who's a major figure in this field, has provided compelling evidence that bilingualism contributes to what's called cognitive reserve.
Cognitive reserve, what does that mean exactly?
Think of it like building up extra capacity or resilience in your brain's cognitive networks. It's like having more neural pathways or more efficient processing available. Studies suggest that this increased reserve in lifelong bilingual individuals may act as a buffer against the effects of brain aging.
A buffer? How so?
It might help the brain cope better with age-related changes or even neuropathology. The evidence suggests that bilingualism may delay the onset of clinical symptoms of dementia or other age-related cognitive conditions, even if the underlying brain changes are occurring.
Wow. That is a genuinely significant potential long-term health benefit, delaying cognitive decline.
It's a major finding, yes. The constant management of 2 languages seems to build this resilience. Think about switching between, say, English and Spanish. It requires you to constantly activate the relevant grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and even the associated cultural communication styles while simultaneously suppressing those of the other language.
That sounds like a constant mental workout.
It is, and this constant negotiation appears to build robust cognitive flexibility and strengthen those executive control networks over the long term.
And beyond the cognitive mechanics, multilingualism also gives you access to different ways of seeing the world, right? It's not just about brain training.
Absolutely crucial point. Each language, as we've discussed, carries within it a unique set of conceptual categories, cultural assumptions, embedded metaphors, and ways of framing reality. A bilingual or multilingual person has access to multiple such systems.
They can potentially think in different ways, depending on the language.
They might find that one language offers a better tool for a specific task. For example, they might leverage the expressive nuances or emotional vocabulary of Spanish for personal interactions, while finding English's structure more suited for precise, technical writing. It provides a richer, more flexible palette for both thought and communication.
It's like having access to multiple cognitive toolkits, and you can pick the best one for the current job or situation.
That's a great analogy. And this very experience of navigating multiple linguistic systems often fosters something called heightened metalinguistic awareness.
Metalinguistic awareness.
It's the ability to consciously reflect on language itself, how it works, its structure, its rules, and critically, how it might be shaping your own thought processes and the thoughts of others. Having direct experience with different ways languages carve up the world makes you more attuned to the fact that language isn't just a transparent window onto reality.
It's a lens, or maybe multiple lenses.
Exactly. So being multilingual can make you inherently more aware of the very topic we're discussing today. It provides a kind of insider perspective on linguistic relativity.
That's a really powerful connection. Multilingualism doesn't just change your brain. It can change your awareness of how language works on your brain.
It certainly seems to. And understanding all these complex interactions, vocabulary, grammar, culture, emotion, cognition, multilingualism, it isn't just academic. It has real practical applications for you, the listener, in your daily life, whether you speak one language or many.
Okay, so how can we apply this knowledge? What are the practical takeaways?
Well, the material points to several key areas. First, in academic or learning contexts. Understanding linguistic influence is really valuable for critical reading and text analysis.
How so?
If you recognize that, say, an article about a global issue written in English might frame that issue through a lens shaped by English linguistic habits or Western cultural assumptions, you can read it more critically. You can ask yourself, what perspectives might be missing? How might this be described differently in another language or cultural context?
So being aware of concepts like linguistic hegemony, the idea that dominant languages can shape global discourse, or noticing potential cultural biases hidden in the phrasing or vocabulary helps you become a more discerning reader and thinker.
Absolutely. It allows you to analyze text not just for what they say, but for how language is being used to shape the message, the perspective, perhaps even the perceived objectivity.
That's useful. What about in the workplace?
In professional communication, especially in today's increasingly multicultural workplaces, this awareness is crucial. It fosters better collaboration and helps avoid misunderstandings that arise from linguistic and cultural differences.
Right. Thinking consciously about intercultural competence and trying to achieve semantic alignment, making sure everyone understands concepts in the same way, despite different linguistic backgrounds, becomes much more important. Even just writing an email.
Exactly. It encourages you to pause and consider, could the way I'm phrasing this report or the way my colleague from another background is interpreting my instructions be influenced by our different linguistic habits or assumptions? This sensitivity can vastly improve teamwork, negotiations, and overall communication effectiveness.
Makes sense. And what about on a more personal level, just for understanding ourselves better?
On a personal level, reflecting on how your own native language or the languages you speak might be shaping your worldview is a powerful path towards greater self-awareness and also greater empathy for others.
How does that work?
By considering your own cognitive perspective, the potential biases, habits, or default ways of thinking nudged by your language, you can gain a deeper understanding of why you perceive things the way you do. And recognizing that others operate with different linguistic lenses fosters cultural sensitivity and makes you less likely to assume your way of seeing things is the only way, or the universally correct way.
It's about understanding the filter or filters through which you experience the world and appreciating that others have different filters based on their languages and cultures.
Precisely. And that recognition is absolutely fundamental to navigating our interconnected, diverse world effectively and respectfully.
Okay, so the evidence for language influencing thought linguistic relativity seems pretty strong and has these practical implications. But you mentioned earlier it's still debated.
Yes, it's important to acknowledge that this is a dynamic field with ongoing debates and challenges. The idea that language shapes thought isn't universally accepted without qualification, and it faces some important criticisms.
What are the main counter-arguments?
One major line of criticism comes from those who emphasize cognitive universalism. They argue that while language clearly influences how we express or categorize our thoughts, it doesn't fundamentally alter the underlying cognitive processes themselves.
So they believe basic thinking machinery is the same for everyone.
Essentially, yes. They point to evidence suggesting that core cognitive abilities, like basic perception, memory capacity, logical reasoning, the ability to understand causality, appear to function similarly across all human populations, regardless of the specific language they speak.
So in this view, language is more like software running on universal hardware. It organizes and communicates thoughts, but doesn't change the hardware's basic capability.
That's one way to frame that argument. The Gugu Yimithir example often comes up in this context too.
How so?
Critics might say, yes, their language forces them to constantly track cardinal directions, which enhances that specific spatial skill. But they argue, all humans possess the underlying capacity for spatial reasoning and orientation. The Gugu Yimithir language simply requires them to train and apply that universal capacity in a particular highly developed way rather than fundamentally altering the capacity itself.
So it's practice driven by language rather than a fundamental change in cognition.
That's the counterargument. It highlights the real complexity of disentangling what's truly universal in human cognition versus what's specifically shaped or tuned by language. It's about balancing cognitive universalism with linguistic specificity. Evaluating the research requires careful attention to empirical validation. How strong is the evidence and how is it being interpreted?
That makes sense. It's rarely black and white. What other challenges or controversies exist in this area?
A really crucial one is the ethical concern about linguistic stereotyping. This is extremely important to avoid.
How does stereotyping come into play?
It's the danger of taking findings about group tendencies that might be linked to language, like the German-Spanish gendered descriptions of bridges or the associations with mañana, and misapplying them to make broad, simplistic, and often negative assumptions about all individual speakers of that language.
Right, like assuming every German speaker personifies bridges, or every Spanish speaker is relaxed about time.
Exactly. Or assuming everyone who speaks a language associated with holistic thinking always thinks holistically in every situation. That's a harmful oversimplification. We have to be incredibly careful to debunk such myths and consciously avoid cultural oversimplification or stereotypical bias.
So the research might show subtle average differences or tendencies, but that doesn't define any single individual.
Absolutely not. While language reflects and reinforces certain cultural tendencies, individuals within any culture are diverse. Their thinking is shaped by countless factors: education, personality, personal experiences, socioeconomic status, far beyond just their native language. The research points to potential influences and tendencies at a group level, not rigid deterministic rules about how any given individual thinks or behaves.
That's a vital distinction to maintain. Engage with the ideas responsibly. Avoid essentializing entire groups.
Precisely. It requires nuanced arguments and critical thinking about the limitations of the research as well as its findings.
Okay, so looking ahead then, this relationship between language and thought, it's clearly complex and still being explored. How might it continue to evolve, especially in our rapidly changing world?
That is a huge and fascinating question. Globalization and technology are fundamentally reshaping communication on a global scale. This is almost certainly going to impact the language-thought relationship in ways we're probably only just beginning to grasp.
Like the rise of artificial intelligence generating language.
Exactly. Think about it. AI language models are producing vast amounts of text, dialogue, code, creative content that we interact with constantly. We need to start asking, how might the patterns, the structures, the vocabulary, the stylistic norms embedded in machine-generated language subtly influence human cognition over time?
Could we start thinking more like the algorithms, or adopting their linguistic habits?
It's a serious question. Are we adapting our own thinking and language use to be more easily processed or understood by AI systems? Or are the biases inherent in the data used to train AI models subtly shaping our own conceptualizations? It's a completely new frontier in the language thought discussion.
That's a profound thought, being influenced by linguistic input that didn't even originate from a human mind or culture in the traditional sense.
And consider social media platforms. Platforms like X, TikTok, Instagram. They expose users to an absolutely unprecedented diversity of linguistic styles.
Yeah, dialects, slang, memes, abbreviations, code switching.
All mashed together, often from different cultures and languages, presented in rapid-fire succession. This constant exposure and the need to navigate these hybrid linguistic landscapes could be fostering new forms of cognitive adaptation.
Maybe making us more flexible at processing linguistic variation, or faster at picking up new terms.
Potentially. Constantly deciphering novel jargon, understanding cross-cultural references, communicating effectively in these fast-paced digital spaces, it might be training our brains in new ways, perhaps enhancing certain aspects of cognitive flexibility, or maybe shortening attention spans for more traditional forms of language. It's hard to say yet.
But it definitely positions us, you, the listener, right at the forefront of this ongoing evolution. We're living through a period where digital linguistics and globalized communication are actively reshaping the landscape.
The relationship between language and thought isn't static. It's constantly being renegotiated in response to these massive technological and social shifts.
It's clear this is a field that's incredibly dynamic, far from settled, and touches on so many different disciplines.
It really is. Linguistics, psychology, neuroscience, anthropology, computer science, philosophy, they all have a stake in understanding this relationship.
So, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the single most important takeaway message you hope listeners will carry with them from our discussion?
I think the core idea is that language is so much more than just a passive tool for labeling thoughts that already exist fully formed in our heads. It's an active, dynamic force. It profoundly shapes how we carve up reality into categories, how we structure our perceptions, how we process information, how we conceptualize and express emotions, and even how we approach solving problems.
It's a partner in the thinking process itself.
A fundamental partner. And exploring this relationship, digging into these ideas, isn't just an interesting academic exercise.
Right, it has real value.
For you, the listener, engaging with these concepts, thinking about linguistic relativity, how vocabulary like color terms or spatial language works, how grammar like gender or evidentiality might subtly guide thought, how culture is baked into language, it's genuinely a powerful path.
How so?
It deepens your linguistic mastery, whether you're learning a new language or understanding your own better, by highlighting these deeper nuances. It enhances cultural competence by revealing some of the hidden assumptions and perspectives embedded within different languages. And it fosters intellectual growth by challenging your basic assumptions about thought, reality, and the human mind.
So, by grappling with how language shapes thinking, you gain not just a deeper appreciation for language itself, but maybe a deeper understanding of the sheer diversity of human experience and how different people construct their realities differently.
Beautifully put. It empowers you to navigate our complex, interconnected, and increasingly technologically mediated world with greater insight, more flexibility, and hopefully more empathy.
Which leaves us with a final, really compelling question to ponder, doesn't it? A provocative thought for everyone listening.
Go for it.
Given this constant, maybe even accelerating evolution of language driven by technology, globalization, AI, social media, all the things we've touched on, how might the very way we think, our collective cognition, continue to transform in the coming years and decades? And what does that ongoing transformation mean for our understanding of ourselves and our understanding of each other across linguistic and cultural divides?
That's the big question to keep chewing on. How is our thinking changing right now, and where is it headed?
Something definitely to keep thinking about long after this deep dive ends. Thank you so much for unpacking all of that with us today.
My pleasure. It's endlessly fascinating.
And for everyone listening, thank you for joining us on the Learn English Lab. If you found this deep dive valuable, please do like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We'll be back soon with more explorations.
Welcome to the deep dive. You use language every single day to plan, to connect, to calculate. But what if the language you use isn't just a window onto your thoughts, but actually the architect of those thoughts? Today, we are tackling a question that is truly fundamental. How does the way you speak influence the way you perceive, categorize, and think about reality itself?
It's definitely a deep rabbit hole, and the mission today is really to give you a shortcut to understanding this complex relationship between language and, well, cognition. We often treat language as just a utility, right? But its influence goes so much deeper than just forming sentences. It actively organizes our internal landscape, dictating how we categorize abstract ideas and even physical objects.
Right. So the big idea is that this relationship is far more dynamic than simple labeling. It means, potentially, that someone speaking Mandarin might be thinking about time fundamentally differently than someone speaking English. And our starting point for this analysis has to be that groundbreaking and, sometimes controversial theory from the early 20th century.
Exactly. We have to start with the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, named after Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf. They observed that speakers of different languages often seem to live in subtly different conceptual worlds. They suggested that language doesn't just reflect reality, it actively shapes it.
Okay, but the Sapir-Whorf idea, on its face, it sounds pretty extreme. Like, are we completely trapped, caged by our mother tongue, unable to think something if our vocabulary doesn't allow it? And that what modern linguistics actually supports?
That's a brilliant distinction to make right away, because that idea you just described, that's called linguistic determinism. It's the strong version of the hypothesis. It posits that language absolutely determines thought, sets strict boundaries. And, well, we know this strong version is largely incorrect.
Okay. Why?
Because humans constantly invent new words, we borrow terms, and we can certainly imagine concepts outside our immediate linguistic toolkit. Think about science or poetry.
Right, we're not totally locked in. So thought isn't strictly caged by language in that absolute sense.
Right.
But there's a weaker version that is stood up to rigorous testing, right?
Precisely. That is linguistic relativity. This version proposes that language influences thought. It guides, it biases, it affects cognitive processes. It doesn't prohibit thought, but it makes certain ways of thinking easier or more habitual, maybe faster. It just nudges your thinking in specific, measurable directions.
Okay, a nudge. So one of Horf's initial inspirations, I remember reading, was his observation of the Hopi language. He contrasted English, where we tend to partition time linearly, past, present, future, and often talk about time like it's a commodity we save or spend.
And Horf suggested that Hopi grammar focused much less on those distinct bounded temporal segments and more on duration, intensity, and the ongoing or cyclical nature of events. Now, Horf's original interpretation is heavily debated, definitely needs caveats, but the core principle that grammatical structure can impact time perception, that has found some spectacular modern support.
Yeah, that brings us to the really compelling research by Lara Poroditsky on spatial metaphors for time, which is fascinating. If you speak English, you overwhelmingly use horizontal metaphors, right? We put the past behind us, we look forward to the future.
But if you speak Mandarin Chinese, you commonly use vertical metaphors as well. The word for up, shang, can mean the previous week, and down, asiya, can mean the next week. Time is sort of stacked vertically, not just laid out horizontally.
So when Broditsky tested those speakers, was the effect just theoretical, or did it actually change how fast they processed information?
Oh, it was measurable, absolutely. She designed experiments where participants answered temporal questions while seeing visual cues, either horizontal or vertical. And the real aha moment was that Mandarin speakers processed temporal questions significantly faster when the visual cue was vertical, reflecting their linguistic habit.
Wow.
And English speakers, conversely, were faster when the cue was horizontal. So this shows that the habitual linguistic framing subtly enhances cognitive speed and efficiency for certain types of abstract reasoning.
So language isn't just describing your thought. It's actively participating in how quickly your brain processes it.
Exactly. It's part of the machinery.
Okay, so if the metaphors we use for abstract concepts like time influence our processing speed, let's unpack a more concrete area of influence.
Yeah.
Vocabulary. Our words are the primary tools we use to categorize reality, right? And different languages vary hugely in lexical specificity, especially for culturally important domains.
Yeah, the quintessential example here is color. The underlying biology of color, perception in the eye, that's universal. But how we carve up the spectrum with words, definitely not universal. So English has one basic term for blue. Russian, however, has two distinct basic color terms, sini for darker blue, and goluboy for lighter blue.
Okay, two distinct words. And what's the cognitive payoff for that mandatory linguistic distinction? Does it actually change how they see?
Well, not how they see in terms of physiology, but how they process what they see. The payoff is speed and sensitivity. Studies show Russian speakers are measurably faster at discriminating between two shades of blue if those shades happen to cross the sini-goluboy linguistic boundary.
Faster, just because the words are different.
Compared to English speakers who just see both as blue, yes. The language forces them to make a distinction, and that mandatory noticing enhances perceptual sensitivity, or at least reaction time to that difference. It's like you're seeing the world through a slightly finer-grained lens when it comes to shades of blue, because your language demands it.
That is a stunning demonstration of how words carve up the physical world. But my favorite finding in this research area has to be about space. The study of the Gugu Yimithirr language. It's absolutely mind-blowing.
Oh, it truly illustrates the extent of linguistic influence. It's incredible. So we, as English speakers, primarily use egocentric relative directions. Left, right, in front of me, behind me. Gugu Yimithirr, an Aboriginal language of Australia, uses absolute cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, almost exclusively, even for really small-scale space.
Only needs small scale.
Like they wouldn't say, move the cup to your right. They'd say something like, move the cup to the southwest. Even if it's just inches away on a table.
Wow. I mean, I can barely maintain cardinal direction awareness when I'm driving, let alone constantly while talking about everyday objects. That linguistic structure imposes a constant high-level cognitive demand, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It means they must, at all times, maintain absolute spatial orientation. They have to constantly know which way is north or south or east or west, and the cognitive impact is profound. Studies show speakers of this language possess a really extraordinary spatial reasoning and navigational ability.
Like what kind of abilities?
Including much better dead reckoning, which for the listener means navigating purely by internal cues and calculating direction without needing external landmarks. They just know which way to go.
So the language itself is acting like an intense, lifelong training program for advanced navigation skills. The words they use for space literally make them experts at moving through it.
It's a perfect case study for linguistic relativity. The language makes that cognitive process not only easy, but mandatory and therefore highly optimized. It's trained into them from childhood.
Okay, let's pivot from vocabulary, which dictates sort of optional categories, to grammar, which dictates mandatory processing. These are the subtle structural rules that dictate what information we must include in a sentence, thus constantly nudging our cognition.
Yeah, and grammatical gender provides probably the clearest example of this mandatory mental nudge. So German nouns can be masculine, feminine, or neuter, often completely arbitrarily. A bridge, die Brücke, is feminine in German.
Okay.
But el puente, the word for bridge in Spanish, is masculine.
Right, so different genders for the same object. And the researchers asked speakers of both languages to describe the same object, a bridge, using adjectives. Given the arbitrary gender, what did they find? Was there a difference?
There was. The arbitrary grammatical gender subtly biased the conceptualization of the object's inherent qualities. German speakers, whose word for bridge is feminine, tended to use adjectives like beautiful, elegant, delicate. While Spanish speakers, whose word is masculine, tended to use words like strong, sturdy, tall. The grammar colors perception, making us project certain characteristics based on a purely linguistic assignment.
That's wild. So your language's grammatical rules aren't just about constructing correct sentences. They infuse a layer of conceptual nuance into every noun you touch.
Exactly. And consider evidentiality. This is a powerful feature in languages like Turkish. Turkish grammar requires the speaker to specify the source of their knowledge when making a statement.
Requires.
You cannot simply say, he went home. Your verb ending must clarify whether you witnessed it directly, or if you inferred it based on evidence, or maybe you are just reporting it because someone else told you.
So you are grammatically forced to perform a quick source check before you can even finish your sentence. Every time.
Exactly, this constant mandatory requirement. Well, it might lead Turkish speakers to develop different cognitive habits concerning information sourcing, reliability, evidence, compared to English speakers, where specifying the source is optional. We usually add it with phrases like, I heard, or I guess, or apparently.
But for them, it's built right into the verb.
Right into the verb. So the grammar forces them into this specific, meticulous cognitive routine about where information comes from.
Okay. Moving beyond structural rules, language also acts as a profound cultural lens, doesn't it? It's like a repository of shared values embedded in our metaphors and concepts. The English idiom, time is money, is such a perfect example. It's a linguistic feature that powerfully reinforces our cultural emphasis on efficiency, productivity, measurable outcomes.
It really does, and that's a lens quite specific to certain, Western or industrialized cultures. While we have to be careful and avoid simplistic generalizations, contrasting it with phrases like the Spanish mañana or the Italian dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing, it clearly shows different cultural conversations happening about time management, priorities, efficiency. Our idioms don't just reflect values, they actively reinforce them every single time they're used.
Yeah, it keeps them front and center. This cultural lens also fundamentally affects how we categorize and maybe even experience emotion, bringing us to those wonderful, untranslatable emotion words. We all know some, like schadenfreude from German.
Right, or mono no aware from Japanese, that sort of gentle sadness at the transience of things, or saudade from Portuguese, hijj from Danish.
So what's the cognitive link? Is it just nice to have these words, or does it do something more?
Well, the existence of these specific labels is vital because it relates to something called emotional granularity. Take schadenfreude. Before you had the word, you might recognize that vague, maybe uncomfortable feeling of pleasure when an enemy or rival fails. Once the language provides the specific, rich label schadenfreude, you can name it, articulate it, categorize it internally. It gives it shape.
So having that nuanced vocabulary gives you a better handle on your internal life. Is that the idea?
Precisely. Research suggests that having a richer, more nuanced vocabulary for emotions, which language provides, is actually correlated with better emotional regulation, better coping skills, and overall psychological well-being. Language provides cognitive tools for parsing internal emotional landscapes more finely. It helps you differentiate that vague, I feel bad, into specific, actionable components like I feel envious, or I feel disappointed, or I feel anxious.
Which then lets you deal with it more effectively.
Exactly. Naming it is often the first step to managing it.
Now, for those listening who might be bilingual or multilingual, this isn't just theory about singular languages interacting with thought. Managing multiple systems has its own demonstrable cognitive effects, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is really relevant. Constant management of two or more languages trains high-level cognitive processes we call executive functions. Think of it as the brain's air traffic control system. We see measurable improvements in multitasking, task switching, and particularly in something called inhibitory control.
Inhibitory control. Why that specifically? What's the mechanism there?
Well, think about it. If you speak, say, Spanish and English, when you're speaking Spanish, your brain is simultaneously activating the Spanish vocabulary and actively suppressing the English vocabulary that's also competing for attention. You are constantly engaging in this mental gymnastics of inhibiting one system while activating another. That practice of conscious mental suppression strengthens the brain's overall ability to focus attention and filter out distractions.
Okay. So it's like a constant workout for that specific mental muscle.
Exactly. And that inhibitory control is essential for complex decision-making, problem-solving, cognitive flexibility, lots of higher-order thinking.
That's a powerful long-term benefit. And researchers like Ellen Bialystock, her work suggests that lifelong bilingualism actually builds cognitive reserve. What does that mean?
Yes. That constant cognitive training doesn't just improve your daily cognitive performance, it may actually act as a buffer against brain aging. The enhanced cognitive reserve built up over years has been shown, in some studies, to delay the onset of clinical symptoms of dementia by several years compared to monolinguals.
Wow. Delayed dementia onset. That's significant.
It is. It suggests the brain finds alternative pathways, compensating for underlying pathology for longer.
And just accessing multiple linguistic systems fosters what you called metalinguistic awareness earlier, the ability to consciously reflect on language itself.
You start to realize that language isn't a transparent window onto reality. You see it as a lens, or maybe a toolkit. And that leads to a more profound awareness of linguistic relativity itself. You recognize that the way you construct reality through your language is just one way among many.
It changes your brain and your awareness of how language operates on your brain.
Beautifully put. Yes.
So for the listener, the practical takeaways from this deep dive seem pretty immediate. We can use this knowledge for, say, critical reading. Recognizing that English resources on global issues might be implicitly shaped by Western or English linguistic habits helps spot potential cultural biases.
Absolutely. And professionally, this awareness fosters intercultural competence. It makes us aim for what you might call semantic alignment, making sure that when you use a key term like efficiency or responsibility or freedom, the conceptual meaning is actually understood similarly across linguistic divides, because it might not be. And personally, just reflecting on your own linguistic lens, how your language shapes your thoughts and assumptions, it's a path toward greater self-awareness and maybe more empathy for others who see the world through different linguistic lenses.
But as we conclude, we absolutely must maintain critical balance. This research has led to great insight, but we need to acknowledge the counter-arguments, the ongoing debate. Critics often emphasize cognitive universalism.
Right. Universalists argue that our basic human mental machinery, the cognitive hardware, is the same everywhere. Language is just the software running on that universal hardware. So while the software, the language, influences habits and processing speed, the underlying hardware, our core cognitive abilities, remain intact, meaning we can always cross linguistic boundaries conceptually, even if it takes more effort.
And there's a crucial warning here too, isn't there? If you know that German speakers tend to describe bridges as elegant, the danger is in simplifying that group tendency and applying it broadly or incorrectly.
Absolutely critical point. We must rigorously avoid linguistic stereotyping. You cannot take a subtle, measured linguistic tendency observed in a group and use it to make broad, simplistic, and often offensive assumptions about an individual's intelligence, personality, or worldview.
Right.
The outcome of linguistic relativity is subtle, measurable influence, biases, maybe processing differences, not rigid determination or some kind of cultural essentialism.
Okay.
It changes the ease or speed or habit of thought, not the ultimate potential of thought.
Okay. So subtle influence, not destiny. But it is clear, though, that language is an active dynamic force. It's a fundamental partner in the thinking process, not just a passive tool.
And grappling with these concepts, I think, enhances linguistic mastery, cultural competence, and intellectual growth all at once. It makes you a more sophisticated user and consumer of language.
Which leaves us with a final, maybe provocative question that brings us right into the present moment. Given the constant accelerating evolution of language, driven by globalization, social media, and crucially, artificial intelligence, which is now producing vast amounts of linguistic input that did not originate from a human mind with human experiences. How might the very way we think, our collective human cognition continue to transform in the coming years because of these new linguistic forces?
That's the big question, isn't it? If our current human linguistic tools subtly influence our reality, what happens when a significant portion of our linguistic diet, so to speak, is generated by a non-human mechanism? A mechanism that doesn't share our physical embodiment, our cultural history, or our evolved cognitive biases.
What does that ongoing transformation mean for our understanding of each other across linguistic divides, and maybe even our understanding of ourselves?
A huge unfolding experiment.
Definitely something to keep thinking about long after this deep dive ends. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're tackling a question today that, well, it probably hangs over every scroll, every quick search you do.
Yeah.
Every time you kind of delegate a mental task to an algorithm. Digital tool search, AI, real-time translation, they promise us ultimate efficiency. They do the heavy lifting for us.
They absolutely do. That promise is huge.
But our source material, this research called Digital Cognition, Smarter Tools, Lazier Minds, end quote. Mm-hmm. It asks the key question. If these tools always do the heavy lifting, are our own cognitive muscles, starting to atrophy? Is the real cost of all this amazing convenience actually intellectual laziness? Let's unpack that.
That's exactly the mission for this deep dive. We need to explore the documented ways our brains aren't just using this tech, but actively, fundamentally adapting to it being constantly available. The technology, it's definitely an amplifier, no question. But the critical thing, the research says, is figuring out what it's amplifying in you. Is it your curiosity? Or is it maybe your tendency to look for the shortcut? So we'll look at how this easy access affects, well, everything. Memory, obviously, but also attention spans, how we solve problems, and maybe most importantly, the difference between really knowing something, genuine knowledge, versus what the researchers are calling the illusion of competence.
Okay, let's start with memory. That feels like the most obvious shift, doesn't it? I mean, it wasn't that long ago we took pride in remembering facts, dates, phone numbers even. Now, if I need, say, the capital of Kazakhstan or, I don't know, the boiling point of mercury, my phone is out before I've even finished the sentence.
It is. And the sources give this a name, the Google effect. It's not just a feeling we have, it's a real documented thing. We tend to forget information if we know we can just easily look it up again later. Our brains are fundamentally, they're efficient, they're wired for optimization. Why waste energy storing terabytes of facts when you know you can just retrieve them instantly?
Right. So the brain's basically saying, don't need to keep that locally. It's in the cloud. We're optimizing our own mental storage.
Exactly. We're shifting from being like a storage unit full of facts
to becoming more like an index or a directory.
Yeah.
We remember where to find the fact, the path to get there, maybe the keywords to search.
but not the fact itself.
Precisely. We remember the retrieval pathway, not the data point at the end of it. Now, on one hand, that's incredibly efficient. It frees up mental bandwidth, right?
Yeah, sounds good.
But, and this is the big concern the research raises, what's the long-term cognitive cost? Does this weaken something fundamental?
And what is that? What's the potential loss, if I can always just look it up?
The potential loss is in synthesis, in connection making, truly critical thinking, generating novel ideas that often relies on holding multiple pieces of information in your mind at the same time. Think about it. If the ingredients for a new idea are all stored externally on the internet, it's really hard to mentally juggle them, to see those subtle connections,
I see. Like connecting dots between, say, historical patterns and current events, or scientific concepts from different fields. Exactly. If you have to stop your train of thought constantly to look up each individual data point, that chain of internal reasoning, it just breaks. You lose the flow, the ability to build complex arguments internally.
That shift in how memory works is, it's profound. And if we're outsourcing storage and maybe weakening synthesis, that naturally leads to the next big area, problem solving.
Absolutely. Think about any complex task.
Right.
Maybe debugging code, solving a hard math problem, even figuring out a tricky DIY repair. Traditionally, you'd sit there, you'd struggle, maybe pull out some books, sketch things out. You'd wrestle with it.
Right. The frustration was part of it.
Yes, but today, the answer to 99% of common problems is just instantly there. Forum post, a quick video tutorial, and AI can often spit out a solution.
And honestly, most of us see that as a win, don't we? Why struggle for hours if Stack Overflow gives me the fix in minutes? It feels like pure productivity gain.
And that's the perspective the research really wants us to question. That immediacy, while it boosts productivity for that specific task right now, It's the very thing that stops us from engaging in what the source calls the frustrating but ultimately rewarding process of struggling.
That struggle, that's where the real learning sinks in.
That's exactly it. The cognitive friction, the trial and error, hitting dead ends and backtracking, that's where deep transferable learning happens. You're not just finding an answer, you're learning how to find answers.
Okay. So if I bypass the struggle, I learn the solution to that specific coding bug, maybe.
Right.
But I haven't actually built the underlying flexible skill to tackle a totally new bug next week.
Right.
I haven't built the mental muscle.
Precisely. You haven't built the muscle.
No.
We condition ourselves to avoid that complexity. And this expectation of instant answers, it bleeds directly into the attention crisis the research highlights.
Yeah, the constant need for stimulation.
If the environment always gives you quick hits, rapid rewards, instant solutions, your brain adapts. It starts expecting constant shifts, rapid stimulation. It gets worse at sustained focus.
That feeling of intellectual restlessness, it's very familiar. I find myself reading a dense article, maybe a book, and my hand reflexively reaches for my phone, just to check something quickly, even a summary of what I'm already reading.
That is a perfect example of what the material terms shallow processing. Our digital environment, constant notifications, infinite scrolls, super short videos, it trains the brain away from deep, sustained immersion. We skim, we read summaries, we grab the gist. But we're not really grappling with nuance, with complex arguments. We're extracting, not integrating.
And what's lost in just getting the gist?
Well, you lose the context, the supporting evidence, sometimes the internal contradictions that actually lead to deeper understanding. You miss the author's real chain of reasoning. The depth of your understanding is often proportional to the time you spend wrestling with the complexity. If you only ever get the bullet points, you get this appearance of knowing. But you lack the foundation. And that leads directly to the biggest risks identified in the research, the illusion of competence.
That phrase really jumps out, the illusion of competence. We feel smarter because we can access anything instantly.
Exactly, but it's deceptive, isn't it? Because access isn't the same as understanding. Proximity isn't possession. You can pull up the key facts about, say, the French Revolution in 30 seconds. Okay, but the source material is really clear. Having those quick facts, that's not the same as knowledge.
Knowledge is different. How?
Knowledge is information that you've actually processed, that you've understood, integrated with what you already know, and critically evaluated. It's networked in your own mind. If someone asks you to really discuss the causes of the revolution, and all you have are those quick bullet points, you hit a wall pretty fast.
But you sound like you know something for a moment, but there's no depth.
Exactly. That superficial layer gives you confidence, maybe even overconfidence, but not the ability to truly analyze or think critically about it. And that overconfidence can actually be more dangerous than just admitting you don't know.
This plays out so clearly in specific areas, like language learning. The tools are incredible now. Real-time translation is mind-blowing.
It really is a huge practical benefit.
If you lean on it constantly.
Yeah.
If it becomes a crutch for every single interaction.
Then the learning can just stop. If you're using Google Translate for every sentence you want to say or understand, you're basically outsourcing the entire mental process of becoming fluent.
You're not doing the work.
You're not retrieving vocabulary from your own memory. You're not applying grammar rules. You're not constructing the sentence yourself. You achieve the immediate goal communication, but you've bypassed the very activity that builds the language framework in your own brain.
It's the same with writing tools, isn't it? Grammar checkers are amazing now.
Fantastic tools.
They clean up the document perfectly. But you, the user, might not learn anything. If you just mindlessly click accept all on the suggestions, it fixes the comma splice, maybe flags the passive voice, the document looks better. But you haven't learned why that comma was wrong or why the active voice might be stronger there. The tool improves, but the user maybe doesn't.
That's the core issue the research keeps circling back to. And they use a really strong example, the student writing a research paper.
Okay.
So traditionally that meant hours in the library, reading dense texts, comparing different viewpoints, synthesizing it all into your own argument.
Yeah, hard work.
Hard cognitive work. Now, the temptation is huge to just pull quotes from the first page of search results, maybe use an AI to summarize the key articles, or even generate a first draft of the essay.
And the assignment gets done, the paper gets submitted. It looks plausible.
It looks finished. But the student might have completely bypassed the real point of the assignment. The goal wasn't just the paper itself, it was the process. The critical thinking, the analysis, the evaluating evidence, the synthesis.
They skip the learning part.
They effectively opted out of the cognitive exercise. They traded that intellectual struggle for speed and efficiency.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the core question. Smarter or lazier? It sounds like the answer isn't a simple yes or no.
No, the source material is very clear on that. It's not binary. The technology itself, it's neutral. It's just a tool, a very powerful tool. It's an amplifier. It can amplify our intelligence, our curiosity, our ability to find and process information. Or it can amplify our tendency towards taking shortcuts, avoiding difficulty, our laziness. Which one it does depends entirely on us, on the choices you make when you use it.
That puts the responsibility squarely back on the user, doesn't it? It requires a real shift in how we approach these tools. It's about intent.
Exactly. Are you engaging actively, mindfully, or are you just passively consuming, letting the tool do the work? That's the critical distinction the research pushes us towards. Are you using technology as a starting point for your own thinking, a way to gather raw materials for you to then process and connect?
Augmenting thinking.
Or are you using it as an endpoint, a substitute, something that just delivers the finished answer, relieving you of the need to think it through yourself?
When you search for something, do you follow the interesting links, compare different sources, really try to understand it, or just grab the first answer that looks right and move on?
That's the difference.
And there's that analogy in the research that really makes this clear. The one about the high-tech gym.
Yes, the high-tech gym analogy. It's perfect, I think.
Yeah.
Technology is like this amazing gym filled with the most advanced equipment imaginable, machines capable of helping you become incredibly mentally fit, strong, fast, knowledgeable. But the equipment itself does nothing on its own, right? It just sits there. You have to show up. You have to decide to put in the effort, use the machines with intention. You have to do the actual heavy lifting.
And just pressing the easy buttons in this gym. What does that look like?
That's the shallow processing we talked about, relying only on summaries, mindlessly accepting every suggested edit, immediately searching for the answer instead of thinking first. If you only ever do that, you get superficial results. No real cognitive muscle gets built.
So the heavy lifting is making the effort.
It's using the search engine to find, say, 3 high-quality, maybe conflicting articles on a topic, and then turning off the screen and trying to summarize the core arguments and synthesize them in your own words. Creating your own mental map, that's the work.
That really sums up the call for digital discipline. We have to be conscious of these habits we're forming, don't we? And sometimes the path to actually getting smarter requires choosing the slightly harder, maybe slower route. Read the full piece, not just the abstract. Wrestle with the problem yourself for a bit before you look up the solution. Try to form that sentence in French before you hit translate.
That intentional effort, that conscious choice to engage your own brain rather than immediately outsourcing, that seems to be the key. It's the difference between truly harnessing these incredible tools to become smarter, more capable thinkers, and falling into that trap the research warns about, the illusion of competence, where we feel knowledgeable, but our underlying cognitive abilities might actually be weakening.
So the main takeaway seems pretty clear. Consciousness, effort. That's the price of admission for genuine knowledge in this digital age. We have unprecedented access to information.
More than ever before.
But access alone doesn't cut it. It won't make us smarter. We have to actively choose to engage, to process, to integrate. Otherwise, we just become very efficient curators of other people's thoughts.
Well put. And maybe we can leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on, building on this research. If success in the future really does depend on being able to connect complex ideas, to synthesize information in novel ways, and if that ability relies more on what you actually hold and connect inside your own mind rather than just what you can quickly access, then the question becomes, what essential facts, what complex arguments, or what core mental processes are you consciously choosing not to outsource today?